They mocked her poverty until she became rich. Grace stood outside the big family hall, holding a small gift she had saved for weeks to buy. Her dress was old but clean. Her shoes were worn, but she had polished them until they shined. As she smiled and stepped toward the entrance, her rich relatives looked at her and burst into laughter. "Look who came," one aunt said with a smirk. "The poor girl wants to celebrate with us." Another cousin laughed loudly. "Grace, you can't even afford a good meal. Why are you dreaming about becoming a business owner?" More people joined the laughter. An uncle pointed to an empty chair near the gate. "Sit outside. Don't embarrass this family in front of our guests." Grace lowered her head. Her eyes filled with tears, but she refused to argue. She placed her small gift on a table, turned around, and quietly walked away into the dark street. They believed poverty would define her forever. But none of them knew, their lives were about to change forever. Grace was not lazy. She was one of the hardest working young women in her town. Every morning before sunrise, she carried baskets of fresh vegetables to the market. In the evenings, she made homemade snacks to earn a little more money. She lived with her two younger siblings in a small rented room after losing both parents. Every naira she earned went toward food, school fees, and rent. Even with all her struggles, Grace never stopped dreaming. She believed that one day she would own a successful business and give her siblings a better life. Her wealthy relatives laughed at that dream whenever they saw her, but she never answered their insults. A few weeks later, another family gathering was announced, and this invitation would change Grace's life in ways no one could imagine. Section 1: The Weight of Poverty. Purpose: build empathy. Show long working days, empty pockets, caring for siblings, turning down her own needs so others can eat, quiet prayers and determination. End with Grace receiving an invitation to an important family event. Section 2. Grace spent nearly an hour washing and ironing her best dress. It was the same blue dress she had worn for years, but she wanted to look neat. Before leaving home, she kissed her younger brother and sister and told them she would be back before nightfall. When she arrived at the grand family celebration, expensive cars filled the compound. The women wore shining dresses, and the men greeted one another with proud smiles. Grace took a deep breath and walked inside with the small gift she had brought. Her aunt looked at her from head to toe and frowned. "Grace, is this really what you came wearing?" she asked loudly. People nearby turned to look. Another relative shook his head. "You don't belong here looking like that. This is a celebration, not a charity event." A few guests laughed. Grace held her gift tightly and forced a small smile. Before she could answer, her cousin stepped forward with a glass in his hand. "So, Grace," he said with a grin, "have you become the rich businesswoman you always talk about? Or are you still selling vegetables by the roadside?" The laughter grew louder. An older aunt folded her arms and said, "Poverty is a sign of laziness. If you worked as hard as you claim, you wouldn't still be wearing that old dress." Several guests nodded in agreement. Some whispered behind their hands. Others laughed without even knowing Grace's story. Grace felt every word like a heavy stone on her heart. She looked around the room and realized that not one person spoke up for her. Without saying a single word, she placed her gift on a nearby table. She turned around and walked toward the gate. Tears rolled down her face, but she wiped them away before anyone could see. That night, as she knelt beside her bed, Grace whispered a promise that no one else would ever hear. "I will never let their words decide who I become." Section 3. The morning after the family gathering, Grace woke up with swollen eyes. The painful words still echoed in her mind, but she refused to let them break her spirit. Instead of thinking about the people who laughed at her, she thought about the promise she had made to herself. Every evening after selling her vegetables, Grace visited the small public library near the market. She borrowed books about business, saving money, and customer service. She also watched free lessons whenever she could use a friend's phone. Every new idea filled her with hope. One afternoon, an elderly woman named Mama Rose stopped at Grace's vegetable stall. She noticed how polite and hardworking Grace was. After talking with her for a while, Mama Rose smiled. "You have something money cannot buy," she said. "You have patience and a willing heart. If you keep learning, your life will change." From that day, Mama Rose became Grace's mentor. She taught her how to keep simple business records, buy goods at better prices, and treat every customer with respect. Grace listened carefully and wrote down every lesson. She also became very careful with money. No matter how little she earned, she saved a small amount. Sometimes it was only a few naira, but she never missed a day. She stopped buying anything she did not truly need. The journey was not easy. Heavy rains spoiled her vegetables. Some customers refused to pay. A small snack business she started failed after just a few weeks. There were days when she wanted to give up, but she remembered her siblings and kept moving forward. Little by little, things began to change. More customers came because they trusted her honesty. Her homemade snacks became popular, and her savings slowly grew. For the first time, Grace felt that her dream was no longer impossible. Then, one quiet afternoon, Mama Rose handed her an envelope and said with a smile, "Grace, someone wants to meet you. This opportunity could change your life forever." Years passed, and Grace's life changed in ways she had once only imagined. The opportunity Mama Rose had given her led to a training program for small business owners. Grace worked harder than anyone else. She learned how to manage money, find better suppliers, and grow a business the right way. She used every lesson wisely. Her small snack business slowly became a food company. Shops from different towns began ordering her products. Before long, she opened a small factory that produced healthy snacks and packaged food. The little dream that people once laughed at had become a successful company. Grace never forgot where she came from. She hired young men and women who needed work, especially widows and single mothers. She paid them fairly and treated them with kindness. Whenever a new worker joined the company, Grace reminded them, everyone deserves respect, no matter how much money they have. She also bought a comfortable home for herself and her younger brother and sister. It was not the biggest house in town, but it was filled with peace, laughter, and love. Her brother finished university, and her sister achieved her dream of becoming a nurse. Seeing them succeed made Grace happier than anything money could buy. Soon, people across the community knew her name. Many invited her to speak to young business owners about hard work and hope. The same people who once looked down on her now greeted her with smiles and respect wherever she went. But while Grace's life continued to rise, things were falling apart for some of the relatives who had mocked her. Several family businesses began losing money. Bad decisions and careless spending left them buried in debt. The fine clothes, expensive parties, and proud words could no longer hide their troubles. Then one morning, Grace received a phone call that made her stop what she was doing. Her cousin, the same one who had laughed at her dream in front of everyone, had lost everything. His business had collapsed, his house had been taken, and he had nowhere left to turn. News of the family's troubles spread quickly through the community. The uncle who once arrived at every gathering in a new car had closed his business after years of heavy losses. The aunt who called Grace lazy had borrowed money from almost everyone she knew. Her debts kept growing, and people came to her house every week asking to be paid. Grace's cousin, who had laughed at her dream, searched everywhere for work, but no one was willing to trust him with another business. His wife became sick, and the cost of her treatment was more than he could afford. Their children had to leave their private school because the fees could no longer be paid. One by one, the relatives who had looked down on Grace began to understand the pain they had caused. They remembered every cruel word they had spoken. They remembered laughing while she stood alone with tears in her eyes. Shame filled their hearts. For many days, they argued about what to do. Finally, Grace's oldest uncle spoke. "We were wrong," he said quietly. "She never treated us badly, even when we hurt her. We must ask for her forgiveness." The others lowered their heads. Pride had kept them away for years, but now they had no choice. A few days later, several cars stopped outside Grace's home. She looked through the window and saw the same faces that had once mocked her old dress and laughed at her dreams. They stood at her gate looking tired, worried, and broken. Grace walked outside and opened the gate. Her aunt was the first to speak. "Grace," she said with tears in her eyes, "we have come to ask for your forgiveness. We also need your help." The compound became silent. Grace looked at each of them without saying a word. She remembered the laughter, the insults, and the lonely walk home that changed her life. Grace looked at them in silence, then took a deep breath. Grace stood quietly for a moment, looking at the faces before her. These were the same people who had laughed at her when she had nothing. Now they stood with lowered heads, waiting for her answer. Her uncle stepped forward first. "Grace," he said softly, "we treated you badly. We judged you because you were poor. We spoke words that wounded your heart. We are deeply sorry. Please forgive us." Her aunt wiped tears from her eyes. "I called you lazy," she said. "I never stopped to see how hard you worked. I was wrong." One by one, the others admitted their mistakes. No one made excuses. No one blamed another person. For the first time in many years, they spoke with honesty. Grace listened without interrupting. When everyone had finished, she took a slow breath. "I prayed many nights because of the pain you caused me," she said calmly. "There were days I had almost nothing to eat, yet I never wished evil on any of you. Your words hurt me, but they also pushed me to work harder." Tears filled her aunt's eyes again. Grace continued, "I will help you, but only if you accept 3 promises." Everyone nodded. "First, each of you must take responsibility for your own mistakes. Do not blame anyone else for the choices you made." They all agreed. "Second, never judge another person by the money they have or the clothes they wear. Wealth can come and go, but every person deserves respect." Again, they nodded. "And third, treat every person with kindness and dignity, whether they are rich or poor. No one should suffer the way I did." "We promise," her uncle replied. "From today, we will live differently." Grace smiled gently. "I forgive you," she said. Forgiveness does not erase the past, but it gives us the chance to build a better future. That afternoon, the family shared a meal together for the first time in years. The laughter that once caused pain was replaced with honest conversation, humble hearts, and a new beginning. Slowly, the broken family began to heal, one act of kindness at a time. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Grace sat quietly on her front porch. The sun was setting, and a gentle breeze moved through the trees. She smiled as she thought about the long road she had traveled. She remembered the days when she carried heavy baskets to the market before sunrise. She remembered going to bed hungry so her younger brother and sister could eat. She remembered the laughter, the cruel words, and the tears she hid from the world. Now she had a successful business, a comfortable home, and the respect of many people. But as she looked back, she understood something important. Her greatest victory was not the money she had earned. It was the kindness she had chosen to keep. She could have filled her heart with anger, but she chose forgiveness. She could have turned her family away, but she chose wisdom. Money had changed her life, but good character had shaped the woman she became. Grace looked at her brother and sister laughing together inside the house, and her heart was filled with peace. She knew that true success was not about having the biggest house or the most money. True success was living with honesty, treating people with respect, and never giving up on your dreams. People may laugh at your situation today, but your future is not decided by your circumstances. Stay faithful, keep working, and let your character speak louder than your success. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to subscribe to Delight Tales TV for more powerful African stories of courage, justice, and redemption.